They didn't just build a new engine, they built a loophole in the future. Because while you were watching Tesla and BYD race to stack bigger batteries, someone quietly rewired the rules. Not in Silicon Valley, not in Shenzhen, in the shadows. You've been told the next era is simple. Plug in, wait, obey the grid. But what if the car doesn't need the grid at all? Picture this, an EV that never parks at a charger. No charging apps, no broken stations, no route planning. Just silent torque and endless motion. And here's the twist that feels illegal. The engine is back, but it doesn't drive the wheels. It hides under the hood like a miniature power plant, spinning in the dark, generating electricity on command, then vanishing into silence again like it was never there. So now you have to ask the question nobody wants to ask. Did Elon see this coming? Because if you can get the Tesla experience without the charging chain, what exactly are you paying for? This isn't a car story. It's an industrial shift. A techno-thriller where the plug becomes optional, and the winners are the ones who planned for the real world, not the perfect one. And in a second, you're going to see why this new Rotary could flip the entire EV era on its head. Like and subscribe to our channel, because the next decade of cars isn't arriving politely, it's breaking in. The industry is shaking, the giants are watching, and you're about to find out why. This is the story of the engine that refused to die. Now listen, if you want to understand the weapon, you've got to understand the warrior. So rewind. Hiroshima, 1920. Mazda wasn't even Mazda yet. It was Toyo Cork Kogyo, shaping cork, building tools, doing the kind of work nobody writes movies about. But destiny didn't care what the label said. By 1931, the tools went down and engines started breathing. And out rolls the Mazda Go, this humble three-wheeled truck that wasn't glamorous, but it carried something heavier than cargo. It carried ambition. Then the war, ruin, fire, ash, the kind of chapter that ends most stories. But Mazda didn't end. It rebuilt. And here's where it gets interesting. Because while rivals played it safe, pumping out predictable sedans with predictable engines, Mazda looked at the rules and thought, what if the rules are the problem? They didn't just want to move you, they wanted to move your soul. Then the 1960s hit, and Mazda drops the Cosmos Sport 110S, low, sleek, and inside it, not a heart that pumps up and down, but a heart that spins. The Rotary era begins, and this wasn't some polite tech demo, it was a declaration, a company saying, we're not here to copy, we're here to carve our own path. That rebel DNA, it never left. It spread to over 120 countries, not because Mazda outspent everyone, but because Mazda sold something nobody could mass produce: connection. They didn't pitch the car as a tool, they pitched it as a partner. Driving matters. It's not a chore, it's an experience, something you explore. And then reality hits. Regulations tighten, efficiency demands rise. The Rotary gets labeled dead, buried, forgotten. A legend people talk about like it's a cool mistake. But Mazda does what Mazda always does. They wait, they watch, they adapt. Because legends don't die, they evolve. Now here's the trap most people fall into. You look at Mazda next to Toyota, next to Tesla, and you think, they're too small, they don't matter. That's how you get blindsided, because size is a deception. You don't measure a samurai by his height, you measure him by his blade. In 2023, about 1.2 million drivers didn't just buy a Mazda, they bought into a philosophy. Across the US, across Europe, Mazda carved out a niche that bigger brands still can't fake: affordable luxury. You pay for a hatchback, but you feel like you stepped into a high-end suite. Premium vibe without the premium punishment. And that matters because it tells you something. Mazda isn't chasing the market. Mazda is building a tribe. And when a company like that goes quiet, you should get nervous, because now the sleeping dragon is awake. While the rest of the world was sprinting like it was late for the future, swapping tanks for plugs, panicking, overspending, and pretending the grid was ready, Mazda didn't flinch. You expect a smaller brand to fold, to chase the trend, to beg for relevance. Mazda did the opposite. They took a breath. They held their ground. They didn't abandon the engine. They perfected it. Because to Mazda, efficiency was never a battery-only religion. It was engineering that feels biological, like the machine is alive and cooperating with you instead of fighting you. That's why they doubled down on Sky Active, not as a protest against EVs, as a reminder you can squeeze miracles out of combustion when you stop building engines like it's still 1999. And here's the play most people miss. Mazda stayed in the middle on purpose. 1 foot in petrol power, 1 foot in electric dreams, refusing to pick a side until the moment was right. That's not indecision, that's silence before the strike. You hear 2% global market share and you shrug, but you're looking at the wrong number. A stable slice of the world means survival without selling your soul. And you're not just buying a car, you're buying what they put into it. Takumi craftsmen in Japan, master-level obsessives, the kind of people who stare at a seam like it's a life-or-death decision. Every curve, every stitch, every surface. And that design language, Kodo, soul of motion, isn't marketing fluff when you see it in real life. Even parked, it looks like it's moving, like it's cutting through the air the way a ship cuts through an ocean. So when a company like that goes quiet, you should get nervous, because now the focus is snapping back to the heart of the beast. While Tesla and BYD were fighting in public over lithium supply, charging speeds, and who owns the future, Mazda was doing something much more dangerous. They were resurrecting a ghost, the Rotary. You've heard the legend. Compact, smooth, different. A spinning triangle in a world addicted to pistons punching up and down. It was the rebel engine. But it had a dark side. It was thirsty. It ran hot. It was brilliant and flawed. So here's the real question. How do you fix a legend without killing what made it legendary? You don't change its soul. You change its diet. And this is where the game changes, because Mazda didn't bring back the Rotary the old way. They brought it back with direct injection. Think of the old Rotary like a fire hose. Raw power, messy delivery, fuel everywhere, efficiency bleeding out in the spray. Now picture the new one as a sniper, computer-controlled precision. Fuel injected directly into the combustion chamber with surgical timing. No wasted drops, no lost shots. Every atom of fuel gets a job. And that job is power. They took the chaotic spin of the past and forced it to learn digital discipline. So what happens? Torque goes up, thirst goes down, and the critics who used to laugh, they get real quiet. But fuel is only half the battle, because if you want to challenge the electric giants, you don't just need efficiency, you need survivability. You have to beat the heat. And this is where Mazda gets cold-blooded. Heat was always the Rotary's curse. For decades it had a reputation. Runs hot, runs hard, burns out. Most companies would have walked away. Mazda didn't. They didn't just tweak a thermostat. They went after the problem like a predator. Thermal valence optimization. And you need to visualize what that means. Inside the engine, they're wrapping advanced cooling jackets around the core like a high-tech suit of armor, channeling airflow with exact control. It's not fighting heat anymore, it's controlling heat. A thermal valenced engine, the kind of machine that doesn't panic in scorching summer traffic, doesn't stumble on freezing winter dawns. It stays in the zone. Because the engine you buy today has to survive tomorrow. But heat is only half the battle, because friction is the silent thief. It steals power before the road ever gets it. It turns energy into waste, and waste is the enemy of range, whether you're burning fuel or pushing electrons. The Rotary spins to make electricity. That electricity feeds the battery, and the battery feeds the motor. So you get the instant torque and silent glide of an EV without living in fear of the next charger. This is range extender warfare. While the giants burn billions building charging empires and supercharger networks, Mazda's move is almost insulting. They just erase the need. And they didn't stop there. More durable, think triple the staying power, sealed tighter to resist leaks, built like they expect you to keep it for the long haul. And then Mazda twists the knife. Multi-fuel capable. Petrol today? Fine. Hydrogen tomorrow? Bring it. Synthetic fuels in the next decade? No problem. You're watching a bridge to the future being built in real time while everyone else is still arguing about the plug.
Because why would you wait 40 minutes for a percentage bar to crawl up a screen when you can fill up in 3 minutes and keep moving? Zero charging anxiety, maximum freedom. You're getting the smoothness of an electric dream with the reliability of combustion reality. Now to the numbers. This is where the middle ground starts looking like the higher ground. You step on the pedal and the world blurs. No hesitation, no gear hunting delay, just pure linear thrust, the kind that snaps your head back, the kind of response you only expect from a massive battery pack. But here's the trick. You can't tell where it's coming from. Is it the motor? Is it the engine? Is it both? It feels like a phantom, a ghost in the machine, because Mazda tuned the system so brutally well that the transition is invisible. The engine wakes up, generates power, charges the heart of the car, then goes back to sleep, and you don't feel a ripple. No vibration, no shudder, no mechanical drama, just an endless wave of motion like the car is pulling electricity out of thin air. And the silence is almost creepy. Sound-absorbing panels, vibration control tech, mechanical noise wiped out like it never existed. You're sitting in a cabin that can rival high-end electric luxury, hearing nothing but the wind, yet you're carrying a power plant under the hood. Now we get to the numbers that keep EV engineers awake at night. A standard EV gives you what? 400 kilometers, maybe 500 if you drive like a saint and never touch the accelerator like you mean it. Mazda is staring at something that looks like a dare. Double, 800 to 1,000 kilometers. Let that land. That's the kind of range that lets you cross countries while everyone else is trapped in a parking lot watching a charging app glitch out. And the scary part isn't just distance, it's time. Because while they're losing hours to charging stops, you're generating your own lightning on the fly. You're not waiting for range, you're manufacturing it. And because the engine is small and light, the whole car can be lighter too. Better balance, sharper handling, that classic Mazda feel, natural, buttery, precise, like the chassis and your hands are speaking the same language. So now, this isn't just a win for you as a driver. It's a wake-up call for the entire EV industry, and for what the next decade of mobility might actually look like. Now zoom out. Stop staring at the engine like it's a cool trick, and look at the map. Because this isn't just moving cars, it's moving markets. The shockwave goes global. You've got giants, Volkswagen, Hyundai, Kia, brands that poured billions into a pure EV future, suddenly pausing with one terrifying thought you're not supposed to say out loud. Did we bet on the wrong path? And the cracks? You can already see them. In Europe, the EV push is aggressive, but the infrastructure isn't matching the ambition. Chargers that don't work, stations that are full, apps that lie, range anxiety that never really went away, it just got better marketing. And when drivers get tired of promises, they don't ask for miracles. They ask for a bridge. Mazda just built one that looks uncomfortably strong. That's why you're hearing analysts talk about a shift, people stampeding toward a smart hybrid solution that fits the world as it actually is, not the utopia everyone keeps pitching. Now cross the Atlantic. In the US, the story gets louder because American buyers worship one thing above all: reliability. You want power without hassle. You want freedom without planning your life around charging stations. You want fill up and go the way you've always lived. And Mazda's promise hits that sweet spot. Practical, simple, no excuses. You'll see projections floating around, market share potentially doubling, something like 2 to 5% in a couple of years. That's not guaranteed and nobody can promise it, but the fact people are even whispering those numbers tells you the market feels a disturbance. And then you look at places like India, where charging networks are still early, uneven, and inconsistent. Over there, this isn't a nice option. It's a bypass, a developing nation-friendly move that doesn't require a grid that isn't ready yet. That's the brutal truth nobody wants to admit. The world isn't upgrading at the same speed. So Mazda isn't selling an engine, they're selling a skeleton key. Tesla claimed the throne. For years, you were told the future was purely electric. Batteries were the only way forward, period. BYD followed close behind, scaling like a machine. But Mazda didn't politely knock on that door. They kicked it. Because they proved something dangerous. Innovation isn't trapped inside a lithium-ion cell, and once that idea gets loose, you don't get to control it again. You can feel the ripple effect already. The leaders who bet the farm on pure EVs start looking over their shoulders, because if you can get the EV experience without the EV dependency, the whole business model gets questioned. And you'll hear rumors, reports, chatter that heavyweights are scrambling to develop their own compact range extenders. Treat that as the early noise of an industry reacting, not a confirmed outcome. But again, the reaction alone tells you what they're afraid of. Mazda didn't just build a car. They might have nudged the entire industry onto a new path. And the money? The money sniffs it first. When this kind of tech gets unveiled, markets react, investors reposition, and suddenly you see optimism around a middle path, a solution for the next 10 years that doesn't depend on a charging grid that's still fractured in huge parts of the world. And that's where the bigger whisper starts. What if EV growth hits a wall? Not because EVs are bad, but because reality is messy. And don't confuse this with a step backward for the planet. If anything, this is exactly what regulators have been describing as transition technology, cutting emissions, pushing thermal efficiency higher, turning the hybrid from compromise into a weapon. Clean, practical, and it destroys the argument that you have to choose between saving the earth and saving your time. This is the smartphone moment. You remember when we traded buttons for touchscreens? That wasn't just a product upgrade, that was a behavior shift. This is the same kind of pivot. The era of the feature phone powertrain is ending, and now the real battle begins. Pure EV versus smart hybrid. And Mazda didn't compete in the race everyone else was running. They created a race. While everyone argues about charging speeds, Mazda is handing you a different kind of freedom. And alarm bells are ringing in Texas and Shenzhen, because for years the playbook was simple. Bigger batteries, faster chargers, more stations. Mazda flipped the table with one question that detonates that entire model. If your car makes its own electricity, why do you need to plug it in? And now comes the fear that spreads through every boardroom. If you can get the silent, smooth torque you associate with a Tesla, without range anxiety, without route planning, without waiting, why pay the premium? That's the pressure building in the market. Because suddenly, billions sunk into charging networks start looking less like an unbeatable moat and more like a bet that might not age well. And the buzz? It's real. You see it in forums, you see it in feeds, you see it in the way people talk when they're done being polite. Finally, a car that delivers the experience without the anxiety. Solutions, not promises. Drive, not wait. And if you want to stay ahead of this curve and watch how this fight evolves, like and subscribe to channel because the next moves from the giants are going to be loud, and Mazda's next move might be even louder. Because now you know the truth. The future of cars might not be a plug, it might be a loophole.